And it wasn't until I got out there and was actually competing on the mats about halfway through my match that I was like, wait on a second, I could actually win this. But halfway through a match isn't the time to find that self-belief, because at that point we're fighting behind. Like, this person that is fighting you probably went into this match with that self-belief. So you're playing catch up at that point. But I told myself after that event that I wouldn't doubt myself again. I wouldn't step onto the competition mats behind the self-belief that my partner held about themselves.
You're listening to Becoming MatchFit, the podcast helping athletes and high performers build confidence, clarity, and opportunity on and off the field. I'm your host, Nick Greentree. Today on Becoming MatchFit, I am joined by Australia's own Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, Adele Fornarino. Adele made history at the 2024 ADCC World Championships, becoming the first Australian, male or female, to win double gold, taking out both her 55-kilo division and the absolute openweight title, and doing so as the smallest athlete ever to win the absolute crown. Adele, welcome to Become MatchFit.
Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to get on here and have some good, interesting chats, I feel.
Love that. So, impressive career thus far. Can you just give us a quick update as to where you're at with everything that you're doing?
100%. So I'm staying as active as I can, competing in anything I can get my hands on. But my most recent accomplishment, which I'm very proud of, was I became the first Australian to ever win an IBJJF black belt world title. So first person to take that home, which I'm incredibly proud of. It's something that I wanted to achieve when I was 10 years old and first starting the sport. It's one of those events that I remember growing up watching all these incredible athletes accomplish their gold medal. So I was able to get out there and win it myself and take it home and have a little bit of a celebration on the back end of that.
I'm glad you celebrated.
It's a good time of the year. December makes it really easy to then have a bit of a celebration afterwards.
Love that. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You mentioned when you were 10 years old and you had dreams. How did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu come into your life?
Very randomly, to be honest. It was one of those sports or martial arts in general that I knew absolutely nothing about. At the age of 9 or 10 years old, decided that I wanted to be a police officer. As you do when you're a 10-year-old, you figure out that you want to chase down bad guys and be the hero. So I would, obsessively watch TV shows like Recruits, where I was seeing these police officers get ready to get out and learn how to actually do their jobs. And part of that was doing some combat training and some martial arts. So I got onto Google. I Googled the nearest martial arts center near me. So if it was a Taekwondo center, I probably would have done Taekwondo. If it was any other form of martial arts, I probably would have ended up doing that, but it happened to be jiu-jitsu. And when I got there was just an incredible coach that was very good with introducing jiu-jitsu to young kids and making it so that it was a game, very engaging, making sure that it was fun rather than just this whole martial art around the discipline of it. There was discipline parts for sure, but he made it so it was a game, and it was always trying to win the game. So that was how I just fell in love with the sport.
Amazing. And was there any other sports? Were you a sporty kid growing up? And yes, you were. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why?
I was an extremely sporty kid growing up. I couldn't sit still. I was one of those kids that just wanted to play all the time. Me and my older brother, he's about 3 years older than me. He was also very, active as a kid. We always wanted to play together and invented games and had all the different types of soccer balls, footy balls, tennis rackets and whatnot. I was also in a position where my parents always encouraged me to be quite active. So if there was a sport that I began to find a little bit of passion in, they would encourage me to pursue that sport. They would take me to the training sessions. They would let me kind of figure it out whether or not I loved it or whether or not I wanted to move on to the other sports. So I'm very, very grateful for that. But it just became one of those things of my brother did a sport, so I was watching him do it, so then I did that sport. So my brother did tennis, and then I did a little bit of tennis. And then my brother moved on to doing AFL. So he did a little bit of football. So then I did a little bit of football, and then he did soccer. So then I did soccer. But jiu-jitsu was actually the first sport where I stepped out by myself and pursued a sport that no one in my family had ever really done or seen before. But it was a new space for me where I got the opportunity to discover this new sport where I could kind of be creative and make it my own. So I was just always obsessed with different sports through my childhood.
Fantastic. Do you think that that mindset has carried you through? Like, is that a part of what makes you, the incredible champion that you are today? Is the background in other sports, or do you feel like it's very specific and nothing else could have trained you for that?
I think that allowing me to kind of explore different sports was very beneficial for me. It allowed me to put a good environment around my competitive nature. So I'm naturally quite competitive. I don't like to lose. I like to win. So sport was a really good outlet for this because it allowed me to, be competitive in a way that there was a problem to be solved. So with soccer, it was how can we get the ball to the back of the net? With football, it was, how can we score as many goals as we possibly can? And with jujitsu, it was how can we control the fight and win the fight? So these are always it's always a competitive nature behind sport, but there's always a problem that needs to be solved. And sport was a really good outlet for me in that regard. Doing different sports probably allowed me to have different perspectives on how to solve the problem because soccer and football were a team sport. So we had to understand how we could get a lot of different individual people with their own individual perspectives and personalities to accomplish the same goal. Whereas things like tennis and things like jujitsu, that's generally a solo person sport where you yourself are held accountable to achieve the goal. But because I did team sports, I was able to use the people around me so that they could help me achieve the goal that was kind of, a single person sport goal. So I think it made me more willing to get the advice from other people and treat it like a team sport in some ways.
Yeah, amazing. That's really good insight there. So going from a 10-year-old Googling what's near me to a world champion, that doesn't happen by accident. So what were some of the key moments or turning points that have shaped your path to where you are today?
And that's a really good question. I think the key turning point that really stands out for me is when I was about 16 years old, I really doubled down on jujitsu. I felt very passionate about it. I was for a long period of time doing soccer and jujitsu, but then realized that rather than spreading my time, I wanted to really put as much time and energy into just jujitsu as I could. So when I was 16, I won a local tournament that winning this local tournament gave me a ticket to travel to America to compete in the world championships. So if this competition hadn't had existed, I wouldn't have had this opportunity and the door wouldn't open in the way that it did. So I traveled to America with my mum and my coach and I competed as a blue belt, as a 16-year-old blue belt in the world championships. And as a blue belt, I won my very first world championship. And that to me was incredibly exciting. But beyond that, going to this event and seeing how many people were so passionate about this sport that I personally loved, seeing the pinnacle of the athletes, so seeing those black belts compete, that was super exciting for me. It really showed me how big this sport was and how big it could become. So that really drove the passion. And ever since that time, I decided I wanted to continue to travel and compete and master the sport that I was doing.
Fantastic. So you mentioned traveling, and you need to travel a lot in your sport to get to those competitions because they're not always
Yes.
around the corner.
Yeah.
How do you cope with that? Being away from home, sometimes away from family, like not everyone can come with you on the road. Managing your mindset, because obviously we know that it's a huge part of any sport, but especially when you're that individual athlete.
Absolutely. So there is a lot of travel that comes with competing in something that's international. I'm 5'3". I'm not super tall, so the actual physical travel of things is pretty okay. I can lie pretty horizontally in an economy seat and not have many problems. I think I sleep better on a plane than I sleep in a bed somehow. I don't know how. But when it comes to being away from friends and family, that's obviously probably the most difficult thing about this side of being an athlete. I find that side of things more difficult than the physical training and output that I have to do. For me, I gain a lot of comfort from having my friends and family around me, specifically my partner, my fiance, Nev, and my parents. Obviously, being around them offers me a lot of comfort and support. So when I do travel and when I am away from them, I try my best to figure out a schedule where I can stay in contact with these people that, mean the absolute world to me so I can still stay up to date with what they're doing in their day, and find out what's going on at home and, what my dog is up to, things like that. That just, allows me to detach from the world of jujitsu for a moment and be just quite normal, quite relaxed and let my body switch off for a moment, which is very important. Yeah. I don't love spending prolonged amounts of time away from the people that I love, but I'm always apprehensive to use the word sacrifice because sacrifice has this connotation of it is not an active decision that I've made. Reality is I've actively decided to travel and pursue this career. It's not something that has taken other things away from me. It's actually given me a lot in my life. So I'm always a bit hesitant to use the word sacrifice, but it is an active decision that I've made. And with that decision means that I have to be okay with the things that are not readily available to me. And that's my friends and family all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a really good way of thinking about it because, yeah, it's, I'm sure, can be quite difficult at times.
Mm.
And how do you, I guess, if we think about, not all performances, or maybe it is in your case because you're such a champion, not all performances are golden. We all have our tougher days. How do you cope with those tougher days? Is it
I have
through friends and family? Yeah.
Absolutely. I definitely have not won everything. I think that, especially in the sport of jujitsu, so a lot of people equate jujitsu with MMA, and there is a lot of similarities, but with jujitsu, you can compete more regularly. With MMA, when you're taking full blown contact to your head, you do need to take some time off to make sure your body, specifically your brain, can recover. But when it comes to jujitsu, because we're not taking as much impact directly to our head and our brain, we can compete very regularly. We can have 20 matches in a year and still be able to compete. We could pretty much compete every weekend, if not every second weekend, if we really wanted to. So I'm definitely not winning everything. It's a lot of matches, there's a lot of wins, there's a lot of losses, there's a lot of learning experiences. But absolutely, like my friends and family and my teammates have been the crutch for me to lean on when I don't get the results that I want. It's obviously, I would be lying if I said that it's really easy to get over those losses and you just move on to the next one. I've got off the mats from losses and I've cried and I've, sat there and obsessively watched my match for 12 hours straight, trying to figure out what I did wrong and how to fix it. But how we actually bounce back from that, I think, is incredibly important, to not let those losses define us and to make sure that we use them as, let's say, data collection or a learning experience. That is the key to success. So I say we because I have a lot of people around me, an incredible team of people that support me and help me kind of mentally move through these things. And we equate a lot of jujitsu to tennis. Tennis is probably the easiest example because tennis is another single person sport. And the best tennis athletes in the world, we take Djokovic as an example. He hasn't won every single match that he's played. We take Sabalenka as a great example. She hasn't won every match that she's made. She actually overcame having not the best serve in the world. She actually had some major problems with her serve earlier on in her career and then was able to fix that and then become number one for a period of time. But it wasn't very much a linear path for her. She wasn't winning everything to then be able to achieve what she's achieved. She was losing a lot, learning from those experiences of her losses, and then able to keep that momentum going and now being one of the best female tennis players in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. We tend to look at the score sheet and focus on the wins.
Mm.
It would be super interesting to dive a bit deeper when, AO comes up and they do show the wins and losses, but
Yes.
what is underneath those losses that, like you say, can be where the value lies, the insights lie, and that's where the growth happens. So thank you for
Yeah.
calling that out.
No, absolutely. I love tennis and I'm very excited for the AO to come around.
Oh, me too. Okay, so at an elite level, pressure comes from everywhere, expectations, results, and even from yourself. How do you stay grounded and confident when it matters most?
I think confidence is something that I've only been able to really utilize as a tool in my competition experience later on in my career. I think that confidence is something that is very much underlooked. Confidence doesn't have to be necessarily grown from experience, it can be something more internal. And that's something that I had to find because it wasn't until I started winning that I understood the value of confidence because it naturally comes as you win. But you have to be able to find that same level of confidence even when you're not winning, even when you're behind on the scoreboard, or even when you've copped some losses before a big match. You have to be able to still find a way to feel confident out there. You have to be your biggest cheerleader, your biggest belief. You have to go out there and have every bit of understanding that you're going to put in everything. So confidence was something that, so I had a competition, and in this competition I was more just excited to be part of the event than I was holding the expectations of winning the event. It was kind of one of those things of, oh, I'm just really excited to be here, it's really cool, this is really cool stadium and there's cameras and all that kind of stuff. So I was enjoying that, but I didn't hold the expectation of winning the event. And it wasn't until I got out there and was actually competing on the mats about halfway through my match that I was like, wait on a second, I could actually win this. But halfway through a match isn't the time to find that self-belief, because at that point we're fighting behind. Like, this person that is fighting you probably went into this match with that self-belief. So you're playing catch up at that point. But I told myself after that event that I wouldn't doubt myself again. I wouldn't step onto the competition mats behind the self belief that my partner held about themselves. So for me, that was making sure that every time I competed, I had the utmost respect in myself, the utmost belief in myself. And that's that confidence. So finding that confidence was a very big tool for me.
Beautiful. Do you have a routine that you take yourself through? I was just trying to, like, because everyone finds it differently, right? And I think some people
Yes.
can be quiet about it, whether it's through meditation or walking or music, and others need to get loud and sort of take up space.
Yeah.
What do you like to do?
I'm super superstitious.
Okay.
Part of me wishes I wasn't as superstitious as I am, because there are certain things that I want to be done in a very particular way that realistically, if they weren't done in that way, probably wouldn't make a difference. But they make a difference to me because it's about comfort, it's about routine. So certain things, like if I'm competing, I need a banana and a blue Powerade, not a Gatorade, not a red one. It has to be a blue Powerade. You know, it can be any size, it doesn't matter, but it needs to be a blue Powerade, which we do a lot of competitions around the world. In some places, it's much easier to find than other places. Some places, they only have Gatorade. So we go to 12 different stores trying to find this blue Powerade, but those are where those superstitions can get in the way. But it's comfort. I know how it sits on my stomach. I know the taste of it. It gets me into that mindset of competing. So for me, my routine, generally I keep a good routine through my whole training camp, but when it comes to actual competition routine, I'll eat a very particular meal the night before. I'll try and get into bed at a very particular time. I'll try and wake up at a very particular time. I'll try and have the same breakfast. I actually have pancakes with banana and Nutella on them before I compete, because it's a good amount of energy and it tastes good and it makes me
Yum.
happy.
Yep.
So even if I'm weight cutting, I'll try and make sure that I can eat that, because I know it makes me feel good. So and it's tasty, it's delicious. So I'll try and get to the event about an hour and a half to 2 hours before I actually compete. I'll do a very particular warm up. So when I get there, I'll make sure that I have a really good training partner that can help me through a very particular warm up, because I know that's what makes my body feel ready to get out there. I'll do some stretching and some breathing exercises before I get out there. And then even as far as the way that I wake my body up before I get out there. So you see some athletes where they'll like hit their arms and their legs to like wake themselves up. Even the process that I go about doing that. If you were to film me, at one competition to the next, it will be exactly the same.
But I guess if that's what works for you and brings you confidence, tried and tested, then it makes sense to stick to it, right?
100%. So with jujitsu, it's easy because you go white, blue, purple, brown, black. From your white belt to your brown belt is all about learning what you need as an athlete. So what music do you like to listen to? What stretches do you like to do? So practicing that is a new skill. So you get to test some of these things. Do I, need to eat this before I compete? Do I need to listen to this music? How much water do I want to drink? That's where you get to play with those things. And by the time you become a black belt and you start to become more of a professional in that sport, that's where you get to really narrow down on these are the things that I need before I'm about to step out there.
Fantastic. You're fully optimized.
As much as I possibly can, but I'm always willing to adjust, always willing to make it better.
Fantastic. And I imagine too that it's less decision making too for you. If you know your routine and you have tested it and it's worked and worked and worked, why bother, trying to stress yourself and come up with something new? You don't need to.
100%. Like, decisions just cause stress for me when I'm about to compete. I don't want to think about anything else other than what my job is to do. So even if there is external things happening, I will communicate with the people around me that I need to focus on what's directly ahead of me. And again, this incredible team of people that are around me tend to take away all the external problems, whether that be about parking, whether that be about accommodation. I have people that manage all of those things because I want to focus on the thing that I'm here to focus on. If that makes any
Absolutely.
sense.
Yep. Perfect. Has your relationship with pressure changed over time? So you've just described that, leveling through the belts. It to me sounds like, is that what that looks like? Or have you found another way of loading on top of that with dealing with pressure?
I think I've been like, pressure has come from different things in my life. And again, I don't want to talk about pressure as though it's a negative thing, because the classic quote is pressure is a privilege. And it absolutely is. Pressure is a privilege. Being in the position where you feel pressure from trying to achieve great things is not the kind of feeling that many people get to actually feel. So pressure originally came from training very hard, not wanting to waste the hard work of the training that I've done, and then going out to compete and not wanting to let my teammates down and my coaches down. But the reality of that is the people in my team, although they wanted me to win, they wouldn't love me any less if I lost. So coming to terms with that is a false sense of pressure was very important for me. And then pressure came from more external people where, okay, social media is a thing and everybody has their opinion. So I go out and I compete and somebody's got something to say. So pressure comes externally from those people. And it's important to come to terms with the fact that people will have their opinion, but not let that actually directly impact the way that I see myself or the pressure that I feel out there. The pressure that I'm like most aware of is the pressure that I put on myself. I do hold myself to high expectations. I think it is important as a professional athlete wanting to achieve like legendary legacy building things. You have to be particular. You have to be a little bit obsessive. You have to hold yourself to high expectations. And that to me is the pressure that I'm now like managing, making sure that it's not an overwhelming amount of pressure, but also making sure that I'm utilizing it in a beneficial way because trying to be a bit of a perfectionist is a lot of pressure, but it also, the results come and it does help get the results you want.
Yeah, definitely. I've spoken to other athletes as well about the perfectionism side of things. And look, I'm no athlete, but yes, I identify as a perfectionist. And I do think that it can be a fine line. It helps you excel, it helps you grow, and you don't get those results without it. But it
100%.
is that management of we don't want the overwhelm. What's that line that you're going to stay in a healthy mindset versus it's a bit out of control now. I'm losing myself and it's taking over.
100%. And that's where, we talked a little bit earlier about when I spend time with friends and family that I do need to be able to switch off. So when I'm on the mats and I'm training, okay, that's my time to be a perfectionist. Like I have to think about how I can be better as an athlete, all the adjustments that need to be made technically and physically. And then, when I'm having dinner with my friends and my family, let me be present there. Let me switch off for a moment. Let me be there. Let me experience what it is to be normal, like normal in quotation marks as much as I can. And let me exist in that moment because when I get back to training, it's on again. Like I have to focus.
Beautiful. That sounds like a healthy place to be.
It's a work in progress, but we're getting there.
Nice. So Brazilian Jiu Jitsu is considered a niche sport, but has such a strong, loyal community. What do you think makes that culture so powerful?
It is a very niche sport and was even smaller when I first started jiu-jitsu. It was a very small sport, but we're going through a little bit of a jiu-jitsu boom at the moment because we're getting a lot of exposure from, let's say, celebrities that are jumping in to start to train jiu-jitsu. We've got Mark Zuckerberg now. We've got a whole bunch of just like famous people that are jumping in to do a little bit of training. I think that it is growing. I think that we're trying to figure out a way to make it spectator friendly and get it in front of more people's eyes. But the community in jiu-jitsu, they love the sport. I hear it time and time again, and every time I hear it, it sounds cliche, but the fact that I'm hearing it so often leads me to actually believe it, where people start the sport and they go, jiu-jitsu changed my life. And it feels super cliche because it just feels like, oh, like really? Did it actually though? But so many people say it. And I think it just offers them a community where they can problem solve with people that are very like-minded in what they're trying to accomplish, which is to get better at the sport. We get people from all walks of life that come into jiu-jitsu. It's the one space in the world where police officers can train with convicts and, lawyers and doctors are all in the same room and, tradesmen training with, multi-billionaires. It's such a weird environment, but everybody is the same in that environment. Everybody is trying to accomplish the same thing, and that's to get better at the sport. It levels out the playing field. Doesn't matter how rich you are, doesn't matter what job you got, we're all doing the same thing. And how much money is in your pocket is not going to stop me from armbarring you. That's how it is. So,
So good.
there's a lot of loyal people in the sport, that's for sure.
Fantastic. How does that community support women specifically?
I think that the women environment is growing. So it started off quite small. It was quite a male dominated sport, but we're seeing it get bigger and better. And we're seeing gyms be more inviting towards women. I think it comes with the more women in the space and the more women that are taking up leadership roles, whether that be from a coaching capacity or just from like a welcoming capacity where a lot of different gyms will let people into the space and almost educate other instructors on how to have a space that accommodates for women is allowing it to be super accessible for everyone. So we're getting better as a sport in really welcoming women. It is one of the best martial arts, in my opinion, that women should be doing because it is not reliant on size and strength. It's very much reliant on technique and other physical abilities. So I think it's the best martial art for women to do. But with every sport where there is room for improvement, there's always going to be room to improve how we welcome women into the space, how we structure classes, how, the basic understanding that men and women, the way that they learn, the way that they want the environment to be is different. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But education is what's going to allow it to be a welcoming environment for everyone.
Absolutely. That's great news. So BJJ
Yeah.
is full of incredible different skills and very transferable as well. So you've got balance, control, resilience, body awareness. Do you see that translating to other sports as well?
I think 100%. We're beginning to see the transfer of skills between jiu-jitsu and AFL at the moment, actually. I have some friends that are in the AFL space that have trained with me since I was quite young, since I was like 12 years old. They've come in and trained. And now they're working with AFL teams and teaching them what I would see as basic grappling skills, but they're putting it into like tackling and control and like blowing the minds of these like AFL athletes that have been playing AFL since they were young, but they're just introducing them to what I would say basic skills, and is actually changing the game significantly. It's adding technique to an area that otherwise wouldn't be a very technical area. So I think it's incredibly transferable to things like AFL, to things like rugby, any contact sport. I think that there are some really good skills that we can pass on.
Fantastic. I think that's super exciting. Not
Mhm.
only the growth for your sport, but then the natural progression, or where else can other sports go that probably think that they're already developed.
Yeah.
Having some little aha moments could be interesting to see what's possible.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's a matter of some of these other sports being open minded, and we've just opened the door a little bit, and some people are starting to poke their heads in and be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. We like what you're doing there." So now we just need to get as many people on board as we possibly can. We did some stuff. A couple of friends of mine did some work with a rugby team called the Dragons, and I think they did a survey at the very end of their training, what would you call it, training schedule, training year. And on the survey, a whole bunch of the team wrote that their favorite session was the grappling based sessions that they had done with some of my grappling friends. And that just goes to show that not only is it really good skills to learn, it's also really fun. It's
Yes.
something different to their everyday training, and it's also learning skills that are directly transferable to their sport.
Fantastic. I remember seeing the write up about that one, and it looked like a fantastic session.
Yeah, it looked like one.
It looked like a lot of fun. I wish I could have been there. Oh. Okay, so a lot of people don't realize that even world champions such as yourself often are self-funding large parts of their careers. You're currently seeking sponsorship to support your competitive journey. Can you talk us through, like, what does that actually look like and why does it matter?
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to something as niche as jujitsu, there's not an abundance of money or funding that can be accessed by athletes that really want to pursue their career. So for me, when I first started, I was funding a lot of my own travel. I was funding a lot of my own training, whether that be training directly on the mats, so paying coaches to teach me my skills, or strength and conditioning training, or if I had questions about nutrition, I had to fund that. I had to find ways to further myself as an athlete. And if you guys know anything about being an athlete and all those different things that come into it, they're not cheap. So getting support from the wider community, from organizations that want to show their support towards athletes trying to achieve things at the top level of their sport is incredibly important. It shows that business is willing to step in and believe in this athlete and their capacity to represent their country in their sport, but also that brand in the sport, is incredibly important. And I think it is needed for all sports. I think we were talking a little bit earlier on about how it's very easy to invest in something that has already reached its peak, but it is much more beneficial for both parties to invest in something on its way up. So think about Bitcoin. It's very hard to buy a Bitcoin now, but if you bought a Bitcoin, a few years ago, you'd be a millionaire. If you invest in something now at its early stage, like female sports, like women's sports that are on their way up, that is on the rise, then by the time that it really peaks, by the time that we see how massive these events and these athletes can be, the people that are going to benefit the most are the people that were there at the start. So that's
100%.
what I'm excited to see.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. And I think also the exciting thing for businesses thinking about sponsorship in this space is you actually get to shape it from here, until it does reach that peak or beyond. So now is the perfect time to jump on board and support.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I think the world is speaking, and it's speaking loudly about its love of women's sports. I think it was maybe not last year, but possibly the year before, where the Women's World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, was the most viewed sporting event in Australia. It speaks for itself. There is evidence to prove that women's sport is just growing astronomically, and we need to put more funding, more energy, more time into these athletes, because we're seeing them at a very good level, but there's so much more growth to be done. Imagine what happens when we put another 2, 3, 4, 10, $20 million into them to see what they can actually do.
Absolutely. What cost do you think surprises people the most that needs funding for an elite athlete from your
I think
perspective?
For me personally, it's travel cost. So, especially being an athlete from Australia that is representing Australia in international events, it's getting out of Australia, getting to these international events, being able to actually be on the ground for an appropriate amount of time. Because being from Australia, you don't want to get to these events a day or two before you're actually competing. You want to get there, you want to acclimatize, you want to change time zones as best as you can. So, actually being able to afford traveling to the events, staying at these locations long enough to do the best or to have the best possible performance as possible. That's the major one for me. But on top of that, it would be things like physiotherapy. So body recovery, things that actually allow me to be the best athlete I can. So physiotherapy, nutrition is a big one, strength and conditioning coaching is a big one. So it may not even need to be necessarily be like financial support, but having a community that's willing to lend their knowledge is also a super beneficial thing.
Fantastic. And it's great to outline exactly what those costs are, because I think a lot of people, but actually when you break it down into the reason for that funding, it becomes more real and more tangible, and then you can see, what the ask is for.
100%. At the end of the day, when I was 16, I was sponsored to go overseas and do my first international competition. And that is what opened the door for me. It was that someone organized a competition with the intention of being able to allow someone to go overseas to really explore that opportunity. And that opened the door. It was from somebody donating money so that I could compete overseas. And now this has been the result of that.
Incredible. Do you see seeking sponsorship as a skill that elite athletes in this day and age need to understand how to tackle? Or is that a skill set that they need to know on top of their performance skills?
100%. So it's very easy to see an athlete as just needing to master the skill of their sport, but an athlete at the end of the day is their own business. They're their own marketing campaign. They're their own, sponsorship campaign. They're their own what would you call it, like publicists and all that kind of stuff. So building the skill of networking and talking to people about sponsorship and being able to raise awareness about the necessity of sponsorship is incredibly important. I think there are so many athletes that are very nervous or afraid to approach people and tell them the realities about what is needed to be an elite level athlete financially, that it leads us in a position where if you don't ask, you don't get. So if nobody knows that this is a necessity, then nobody knows. So nobody is able to help. But if more people understand that athletes need support, athletes need help financially to actually be able to go to these events, more people will be willing to step in and actually help.
Definitely. If a brand is listening and genuinely wants to support women's sport and elite athletes, what kind of partnerships would actually make a difference for you?
I think every partnership. I used to think that only sports related partnerships were the only beneficial ones, but every single business owner, every single person that works in a corporation, every single person that has access to funds that can support an athlete is beneficial. If ever people are in a position where they can throw money towards something that they believe in, that is sponsorship. It doesn't need to be, necessarily a sports related thing. It can be any kind of business that is looking towards helping out athletes, especially female athletes that are generally overlooked and underfunded. Those are the people that need it the most. So everybody, every man and their dog is in a position where if they financially can make it work, they can sponsor and they can fund these athletes.
Fantastic. So leads me to the bigger picture. You've spoken about wanting to leave a legacy for young female athletes. What does leaving a legacy look like for you?
For me, it comes in a lot of different levels, a lot of different domains. So personally, leaving a legacy of having an accomplished career is very important to me. But beyond that, leading a legacy of elevating the sport and leaving it in a better position than when I came into it is what's important to me. So for me, that comes in the position of getting better funding for all these incredible female athletes that I see, making sure that we're equalizing the pay gap between our male counterparts that on average are getting paid more than we are. So making sure that we're really bridging that gap so that the next generation that comes in can get paid what they deserve is incredibly important to me. And then just overall creating an environment in jiu-jitsu in general where women can come in, they can feel safe, they can feel accepted, and they're in an environment where they can learn and really be encouraged to compete at the best of their ability is very important. I think all these things is what's going to actually grow the sport in general.
Fantastic. So the name of this podcast is Becoming MatchFit. What
Yes.
does becoming MatchFit mean to you? Maybe not just as a world champion, but as a person as well.
I think becoming match fit is, of course, there's the physical aspect of it, but becoming match fit is becoming an all encompassing athlete. So, all the things that it is to be an athlete, making sure that we're never feeling content, but always learning these new skills, learning how to be a better athlete, but learning how to negotiate, learning how to network, learning how to talk to sponsors. All these things is what allows us to be better athletes. So becoming match fit is really thinking about the overarching thing of being an athlete.
Fantastic. So thank you, Adele. We have come to the end of our time. It has been such a treat talking to you, and I really do value your insights and your time as well. For anyone wanting to connect with Adele and find out more and perhaps even sponsor you, I will put your details in the show notes for people to know where to find you.
Amazing. That's awesome. I just want to say a massive thank you for having me. We've had lots of conversations that haven't necessarily been recorded and had amazing chats, but it's obviously great to get on here and share my opinion on some things. We always have really fun conversations, and this one was like the rest. It was an absolute blast.
Thank you. I do love our chats as well. Well, thank you, and best of luck in your next competition, which I know is just around the corner.
It is. Thank you so much. I always appreciate the support.
Thanks so much for listening to Becoming MatchFit. If today's conversation inspired you, feel free to share it with a teammate or someone you love as well. You can access free tools, resources, and our community in MatchFit 360 Academy. The link is in the show notes. Until next time, unlock your value, change your game, and become MatchFit.